Hi and welcome to the sew along video for pattern 1717 Osana's rear zip hoodie. So first, a couple of housekeeping things. We're going to use a 4-thread overlocker, so go ahead and load your overlocker with 4 threads of matching thread to your fabric. Also make sure your stitch width is set at 1/4 inch, which is 6 millimeters. So in addition to sewing this with the overlocker, you're also going to need a plain sewer, just a plain regular stitch with your regular sewing machine. Make sure you have a longer than normal stitch length for that, and make sure that your sewing machine has a ball needle in it, because ball needles will stop the needle from cutting through the yarns of the knit fabric and causing a run. So when you're ready, we're going to get started on the hood. Take your hood pieces and right sides together. We're going to overlock the long curved edge of the hood. So place the pieces right sides together and match the beginning. Now when we overlock this, we're not going to cut any of the fabric off. We just want to run an overlocking stitch on the edge of the fabric, and we want the blade to cut off any stray or fraying threads. So when you're ready, overlock through that curved edge. Take your time and find the notch and make sure that the notches match. There's my notch there. Okay, so now we're going to do the long edge here, which is the centre front or the face opening edge. So open this piece up and overlock on this edge here. Okay, so now let's move across to our plain sewer. At the edge here you can see a notch. Now that notch is there, and that notch is at 3/4 inch, which is the 2 centimeter position. So when I say 3/4 inch, it's actually 13/16 inch, but 3/4 is near enough. What that notch tells us is the position that we need to fold this over. So all we do is fold this over so that wrong sides are together, making sure that the notch is on the edge. Now we come to our plain sewer, making sure that we have a ball needle here and that we've lengthened the stitch length. We want to sew a line directly on top of that overlocking. We want the stitches to be hidden in that overlocking. And if you have a thread guide here that's in metric, you'll see the 2 centimeter line, so it makes it very easy to just follow this through. So go ahead and stitch that all the way through to the other side. When you get to the join here, make sure that those seams are sitting on top of each other, and continue sewing. When you get to the other end, make sure you place that notch on the fold position. Okay, so now we have one line of stitching in place. We want to mimic or make a line of stitching parallel to this so we can mimic the look of a cover stitch, which would normally be used to sew this garment. So the width you sew this is up to you. I'm going to sew this at foot width, which is 6 millimeters. So up to you. You could sew it 1/4 of an inch if you wanted, whatever you prefer. So now go ahead and press that if you want, put it somewhere safe. We're going to work on the back pieces, so you're going to need your matching pair of backs and your zip. So my apologies, somehow I've managed to delete this video clip, but what we need to do is overlock the centre back. So overlock from the neck edge down the centre back, stop at the bottom, pivot, and keep overlocking around about 3 inches or 7 centimeters along the bottom edge, making sure you can still see notches. Now because this is a knit fabric and we're going to sew it to a woven zipper, what might happen is this fabric might stretch as you're sewing it in. So you may need to buy some fusing tape or something to stabilize the seam. I don't tend to have a problem with doing this, but there are stabilizing products available if you need them. So this zip is going to sew in so that it unzips from the bottom. So because this is a longer zip than I should be using, I'm going to mark with a pin where the correct length position is. Now in actual fact, because I've bought a longer zip, it might be slightly easier for me in case there is any stretch, so do bear that in mind too. So let's start with this side. So this side would be the right back as if you're wearing it. Take the zip and place it right side down onto your piece like this. We want the end of the zip here to be parallel to the notch that we have. So I've just placed a pin here, so this is the notch we're looking for. It's just over 1 inch up from the bottom. What we're going to do is open this zip up, and this zip we want to place so that the bottom stopper is just above our notch position. Match that edge there, the edge of the zipper, to the overlocked edge of our fabric. We're going to start by sewing a seam up here. Now because we want the bottom of our garment to look nice and tidy, what we're going to do is begin the stitching by folding the end of the zipper take back up on itself like this, and we want to angle it slightly out because that notch at the fold position is going to come up like this. So what we want to do is hide the bottom of the zipper like so. So when you have that in the correct position, and if you need to, just use a pin to hold that in place. Oops, that pin's a bit blunt. That was a bad choice of pin. Okay. So we're going to come to our plain sewer What I'm going to do is just use my presser foot to hold the bottom of that in place. I'm going to jam the side of the presser foot against the plastic, or you might have a metal zip here, because this will give me a 5mm gap between where I'm going to stitch, so where the turn is for the zip, and the edge of our zip. It'll give us a nice even stitching line. So when you're ready, stitch just the beginning of that into position. So I'm just stabilising that to use it like a spare pair of hands. Now what we want to do, and you might find it easier if you unzip part of the zip, is we're going to stitch this zip in place. The whole time we want to make sure our stitching line is nice and even, because we're going to see this part of the zip tape on the right side of our garment when it's being worn. When you get to a certain place, what you might find is you need to leave the needle down in your work, lift the presser foot, and just close the zipper. That will just give you a little bit more space to work with. So continue stitching that all the way up to the back neck area. So what we've done at this lower edge is create a nice wee fold back like so. So now we're going to repeat for this side of the zipper. Take the other side back and place that right side down. And remember to open up that zipper a little bit to make it easier for you. Then find that notch position. That's going to show us the turn area. Match that to just below the bottom stopper. Now, and you might find it easier to turn this over, angle this end of the zipper tape out of the way, fold that edge back on itself, making sure that that notch position is our fold point. Come to the machine and making sure that we don't sew over our needle, because that will break our needle with the pin. Sorry, we don't sew over the pin because that will break our needle. Make sure you stitch this side the same distance away that you stitched the other side. And remember to back tack at the beginning of your work. So I like to just sew the first few stitches just to hold everything in place. And now I'm going to arrange my work, making sure my edges are nice and even, and continue sewing. Now normally we don't sew with the bulk of our work on this side, but because I sewed the other seam that way, I want to make sure that I sew this side the same way as well. Now take your time arranging this, and at the same time make sure that this is well out of the way. We don't want to end up doing any unpicking. I'm going to take this side nice and slowly. So as you can tell, that's a little bit uneven, but it's really not terrible, and my seam's going to come over the top here. So as you can tell, I bought a 50cm zip I bought a 55cm zip, which was 5 centimeters or 2 inches longer than I probably should have of for this pattern, and due to the stretch in this fabric, it's taken up an extra 2 inches. So beware of that when you buy your zip. So the bottom end looks like that, and everything's all nice and even on the way up. Okay, so now we're going to start working on the front and sew the shoulder seams together. So find your front piece, and we're going to go back to our overlocker. So our sleeves are a mirror of each other. So what that means is the front and the back are the same, so we don't have to worry about matching anything more than the crown notch. So the crown notch is the notch at the center of the top, and that needs to match to the shoulder seam here. So place your body of your garment right sides up, and this is the back here and this is the front, and take one of the sleeves and place it so right sides are together, and that notch there matches the shoulder seam. So we're going to sew the armhole here. So making sure we have that point anchored, we're going to sew in that sleeve. Now you may need to gently stretch this out. So the easiest way to do that is to match the beginning point and just overlock an inch or so. What that does is it holds our work in place. Then come to the crown notch area, the shoulder area, and match that notch position. Then gently distribute that stretch evenly throughout that whole seam. We want to make sure that the stretch is even, because it will make our garment look better. And when you're ready, overlock that seam together. And now when you've done that, we're going to sew the other sleeve in. So just repeat the process on the other side. Come to the cuff area of the sleeves, and we're going to place this right sides together. We're now going to sew the side seam of the garment from the cuff all the way through to the side seam hem. So match that in the correct position. Sew a few stitches to hold the work together, and sew that side seam into place, remembering that the side seam is also the underarm. So what we're looking for is that the underarm seams match and that any extra fullness is evenly distributed as we sew. As we approach the underarm area, let the blade cut previous overlocking off. As we approach the end, we're looking for an overlap a little bit like this. When the overlock stitches through the middle, we're going to end up with a transition, so you will need the end to overlap something like this. So you're looking for that 1/4 mil gap as the end point. And now repeat this for the other side. So now we're going to work on the cuffs, and if you have a contrast colour, you may wish to change your overlocker thread now to the contrast colour. I'm going to leave mine in the soft pink because I don't think you're really going to notice it through this beigey camel colour. So our cuffs are a rectangle of fabric, and what we want to do is right sides together, we want to sew the shorter end. So overlock through the shorter end, making sure that notch is still visible through our overlocking. And repeat for the other cuff. The seam we've just shown is going to be our underarm position. So what we need to do now is turn this back on itself, and that notch there is our fold position. So you'll notice when you turn that back on itself that there's a notch directly opposite the underarm position, and that notch is going to sew into our sleeve, the top arm line on our sleeve. So it's just going to help us with placement. So when you've turned that cuff the correct way around, just do the same thing for the other cuff. What I'm going to do now is take off the side of my overlocker here, because I have a very handy piece that enables me to sew cuffs nice and easily. So with the wrong side of our garment outside, take one of the cuffs and we're going to place it inside the sleeve hem area. So we want to match the seams of the cuff to the seam on the sleeve, and then if we come directly opposite, you will find a notch on the garment which will match to the notch on the cuffs. And so when you have everything in the correct position, go ahead and overlock those 3 layers together. and just trim off any stray threads that you might need to. Do a bit of quality control to work on the way. So when you're sure that you're happy with that cuff, repeat for the other sleeve. So when you're ready now, we're going to work on the hood. So I strongly suggest that you start sewing the hood on the plain sewer rather than just attaching it directly with the overlocker. You might have some issues because of the zip. Take your hood pieces and lap over the centre front area. We want to make sure the two middle notches are on top of each other. Then we're just going to secure them in place by sewing some tack stitches just within the seam allowance. So we're going to go ahead and attach this with the overlocker later, so make sure we just tack them on about 1/4 of an inch from the raw edge. So these hoods need to lap over each other. So that notch there is the centre front, and the seam here is the centre back. So we need to place this to our garment neck edge, making sure that this notch here and the other notch match the shoulder seams. So the easiest way to do this is to turn our garment inside out, and with our hood right side out, place that inside the garment neck edge. So the front area here, the notch here, needs to match up to the notch at the centre front of my neckline. If you just put a pin and maybe anchor that into position, and the hood centre back seam needs to match directly to the centre of our zip. Now I've shortened my zip using the industry standard method for zip shortening. If you need to learn how to do that, you can download that tutorial from the website. It is a paid tutorial. So just anchor that into position there. Then find the hood notch on the hood and match that to one seam at the shoulder. And I like to now match the other notch to the seam at the other shoulder. Now to make it easier on myself to overlock this in, I'm going to tack this into place using my flat machine. You don't have to. If you're comfortable now, you could go to the overlocker and overlock that in. It is going to need to be overlocked in for the stretch, especially to help it fit over the head, but it might just make my life a little bit easier because this fabric is quite curly around the edges. So I'm just going to run a line of tack stitches around that neck edge. And remember, if you do your tack stitches in the same colour as your garment, especially if you keep them close to the edge, they'll just be hidden in the overlocking, so there's no need to remove them. Make sure you stretch and distribute the fullness evenly through those positions that we've pinned. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my overlocker and overlock that into place. So I'm going to overlock this with the hood at the top, but it's entirely up to you. I'm also going to start at a shoulder seam, but that's entirely up to you as well. So I had a few issues with my overlocker running over the zip edge, so be very careful you don't smash your needle there. And what I'm going to do is just run a line of stitches there with my flat machine just to make sure everything's held in place properly. So I've run a line of stitches here at the top of my zip, and this is what we're looking for on the right side of the garment. So now we're going to move on to doing the waistband.
Why I'm so relaxed about any zip length growth in this garment? Well, the centre back of this garment is on an angle, so it really doesn't matter if that angle gets increased. If this was the centre front of something like a bomber jacket, I would be very concerned that the zip length needs to be perfect. But just due to the nature of this garment, we don't really have to get too stressed if that stretches in the centre back area. If you have issues where your zip has ended up too short, don't be tempted to cut anything off the upper area to compensate. Just make yourself a patch like I've shown here in green to fill up the space. It won't be seen under the hood when the garment is worn.
The waistband is a big long rectangle, so take one of the short ends and fold it in half like so, and the notch at the fold is there to show us the fold. So what we're going to do is overlock that end together. And we're going to make sure that we fold it exactly the same way at the other end, so right sides are together, and that the notch is at our fold. So now we're going to turn this so that the wrong sides are inside, and make sure when you turn it you get a nice sharp fold on the bottom edges. So when this is right side out, what you will notice is we have notches. So this position here goes to our back notch. This is our side seam. There is one for the center, another side seam, and then this will be our other back notch. So go ahead and take the bottom of your garment, and we're going to start matching these notches together. So what this means is come to the lower back position and turn around, and you'll see a notch in from the center back. Now that notch needs to match one of the edges of our ribbing. So making sure we have the 3 pieces together, pin or hold that into place. So as you can tell, it's set back from the centre. Now work your way along to the side seam and find the notches for the side seam position. And match and hold those edges together. Work your way through to the centre front, and at the bottom of the centre front you'll find a notch, and that will match to the notches here on your band. Now this ribbing I'm using is rather stretchy. Certainly feel free to reduce the measurements of the length of this ribbing band to suit. If you have firmer fabrics it might be fine. If you have looser fabrics you might find it needs to be shortened a bit, in which case you'll need to adjust all these notch positions as well. And just remember to ease out the fullness through the centre front and all the notch positions. So when you have the other side seam in place, come through to the other back and find the notch and match that point there. And when you're ready, come to your machine and overlock that together. So as you can tell, our notch position has had the overlocking previously overrun there. Remember to, when you're overlocking, not to overlock over any pins. So once you've got the first bit of overlocking out of the way, remember to distribute the fullness between the points. And remember when you come to the end that you want the edge of this on that notch position. So now we're going to move back to our plain sewer just to finish off the lower edge of the zip. So we want to tidy this lower edge here. So take this overlocking, tuck it up into the seam area, because it's a good idea to not cut overlocking directly off at the edge, because it will fray back into our garment or come undone. I call it fray, but it really comes undone. So come to around about an inch away from the edge here. We're going to edge stitch or foot width stitch, whatever you prefer, down this lower edge, and then we're going to go up the back around about an inch, whatever you prefer, and this will just hold all those layers into position. So your choice whether you edge stitch it or not. I'm going to do a foot width. So a foot width is 6mm or around about 1/4 of an inch. So what that means is I'm just putting the foot on the edge of the seam there. So we just want to make sure the back of this garment has a nice straight line. So let's do this. I'm going to stop that foot width distance from that fold point there at the zip. I'm going to pivot, and I'm going to sew up the same distance I sewed there. Okay, so now I'm going to repeat this on this side. I'm going to do it in reverse. And I want to start directly opposite, so my stitches are parallel at the top. Remembering to back tack. I'm going to maybe go forward or to here, stop and pivot. To open that up to hold it. I'm going to rearrange my work. Oh, and as you can tell, I didn't make sure that was on the edge when I overlocked it, so we'll just pretend it is by tucking it under. And hopefully we'll be able to rearrange that and press it out. Sorry about that, guys. Things you need to be aware of is to take your time doing these things. Okay. Right, so when everything's in the correct position, continue stitching. And stitch the same distance through and back tack to finish. And then trim off any stray threads and do some quality control work. And your garment is finished. So thanks for joining me for this sew along video for Osana's rear zip hoodie. I look forward to you joining me for our next sew along video.